We have quite a few people signed up for this evening, which is awesome because it's these summer nights when people are out doing all kinds of things and making time for this kind of stuff. It shows you how important it is. So welcome everybody. We're just kind of stalling time here while the room fills up with our participants. We will get rolling here in just a moment. We've got a lot of content.
Favor and grab me some water. My lips are going to get sticky.
Seth's lips are going to get sticky.
Oh, is my thing not muted?
No,
I muted on the mic.
But we're enjoying that.
All right.
Okay. And y'all
that was muted, right?
What's that?
That was muted.
I'm just going to use the mute on Zoom. Apparently that's reliable.
All right. Good evening, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started now. I think Seth has his water. We've all got our water. I'm Julie Barrett, founder of Conservative Ladies of Washington, and we are in week 4 of our summer Smackdown series. And tonight we are doing part 2 of our K-12 education in Washington State. Last week we did focused a lot on the legislation and everything that has kind of gotten us to the point where we are here in Washington State with education. And you can go back and watch that on YouTube. I'll put the link in the chat for you. That is recorded, and tonight is being recorded as well. So if you have friends that should watch this, please do share the link with them. We will be emailing that out after it gets up on YouTube. But tonight we are going to be talking about alternative solutions to public schools. And we're also going to be talking about tools and information that you need as a parent, grandparent, citizen, if you are going to have a student in the public schools, and how you can navigate that and act in the best interest of your child. We have a great panel with us tonight, and I'm going to just quickly introduce them all because we have so much content to get into tonight that I don't want to spend a lot of time on introductions. A lot of repeats from last week. We have got Jeannie Magdua, who is one of our Conservative Ladies team leaders, also Leslie Williams, another CLW team leader. We have got former Representative Brad Klippert, 14 years in the 8th Legislative District, and he is also running for OSPI, Office of Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction. I got it. And we need to really support Brad. We need to get Brad into that position. That would be a huge win for Washington kids. So please, I'll put some links in the chat so you can check out his campaign, make donations, have an event, volunteer, but we got to make this happen. We've also got Alex Chrostowski from Gays Against Groomers. She is the leader of the Washington State chapter, and she's got a wealth of information on tools to protect your kids from a lot of the garbage that's going on in public schools. We've got Seth Bridges, aka Rogue Teacher. Seth is a public school teacher in Washington State, and he is really focused on helping parents to find alternative solutions to what's going on in public schools and kind of being a whistleblower on what's happening in our public schools. And lastly, but certainly not least, we've got Joy Gjersvold and AnnMarie Adams, who are Joy is the chair and AnnMarie is the vice chair of the Kitsap County Moms for Liberty chapter here in Washington State. So we've got a great group tonight with tons of information. We're going to kind of start with alternatives to public education. And so I'm going to turn over to Jeannie. Jeannie is a teacher. She also has experience doing homeschooling. And so Jeannie, talk about what are some of the other options if a parent doesn't want to homeschool or doesn't want to do public school.
Or doesn't want to do homeschool.
Or doesn't want to homeschool.
Right. So I think the best way to kind of illustrate this is with the experience that I had. So at the beginning of 2020, I was living in Hawaii, and I knew I was going to be moving back to Washington. And I was watching our state legislative session where State Rep Sutherland was railing against the sex education bill. And I was practically on my feet shouting in support of what he was saying, thousands of miles away. Well, then we come back to Washington right at the start of the shutdowns. I had a 12-year-old daughter, and there was no way to get her in school at the end of the school year. They said they weren't even doing registrations for the next school year because they had no idea what was going to happen. So I thought, okay, well, if anybody is going to give my child a bad education, it's going to be me. So I decided to homeschool, and I'll be honest, it was awful. It was such a difficult experience because this is my fourth child. I had never done homeschooling. She had been in public school her whole life up to that point, and that's what she wanted. She wanted the social interaction and everything. And so it was miserable for both of us. I did do a co-op. So there was a co-op opportunity here in our neighborhood. So I did partly homeschooling and partly co-op, and that did help a little bit because I'm not a math teacher. So I definitely needed the support in that. And I had her in math classes in the co-op. But I knew that moving forward, so that was the 2020-21 school year. Moving forward, I knew that homeschooling was going to be more of a challenge. This was also a time when my daughter was terribly isolated because of the shutdowns. There was, we had been living in Hawaii for a while. We come back at the beginning of the shutdowns. There were no opportunities for this kid in middle school to interact with other people, other kids her age. And I honestly feared that she was going to harm herself. So I was begging people, do you know anywhere where kids are meeting in person, where I could throw my child in there and have her with other kids? And Julie let me know that her church's youth group had been meeting in person. So I took her there. She was finally able to interact with other kids who were going to a private school that was not shut down. They were, having in-person classes. So she begged me to get her into the school. Well, my husband and I could not afford private school. And what I learned was that not just this private school, but nearly every private school in the state have scholarship opportunities. So we applied for scholarship and we got her into this private school. So we kind of ran the gamut of, homeschooling, co-op, and then private school. I was desperate to keep her out of public school. I knew how bad things were getting, especially when I learned that the referendum against the sex ed bill didn't pass. So I didn't want her being exposed to the sexual content in public schools. So I just knew that the determination was to keep her out of public school. And, I'm a Christian, so I believe that God can provide. You can also think of it as where there's a will, there's a way. If it's really important to you to keep your kids out of public school, you can find a way. There are ways out there for it to happen. So that's my story.
That's awesome, Jeannie. You really did have sort of that with your daughter. You really did sort of have that spectrum of experience with alternatives, and that's great for people to know that private schools in Washington state have scholarship opportunities. So definitely, if you're considering that route, definitely want to pursue the scholarship opportunities, because I know most families, the financial piece of that is what holds them back from doing private school. So definitely look into that if you're thinking about private school. I want to kick over to Leslie Williams because Leslie is a homeschool mom and maybe doesn't hate it as much as Jeannie. I think I would be with you, Jeannie, and I would not like it. Leslie, you're also a mom of 4. Am I correct?
Well, there's 4 at home. There's
Where
a
do you keep the
total-
other ones?
There's a total of 8, but the oldest is 30
Okay.
and the youngest is now 2. So there's 4 at home. The rest are out of the house.
We'll talk a little bit about homeschooling, and I know that that's working very well for your kids. And I know you have a daughter that really has did not thrive in public school and in homeschool has really. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, he's now 21, but my 21-year-old boy is kind of where it all started. When we moved here to Washington, the public school that he was in was letting him watch porn on the computers at school. And they were giving him electronics, laptops to bring home. I would take them away. Cell phones would end up coming home. I'd take them away, tablets. So I was dealing with that in the public school. And then my daughter started having some problems. And when I found out what was going on with my son, we pulled my daughter out. My son refused. He wanted to stay in public school. So we pulled my daughter out. But before we pulled her out, we decided to give her a placement test to see where she was sitting. And we found out with that placement test, she was 4 years behind. But she was an AB student in school. How is somebody that's an AB student in school in all of her subjects 4 years behind? So we said that's enough. She was doing a recipe here at home, and she had to cut the recipe, and she couldn't figure out how to cut it. And it took her 45 minutes. And I finally said, what the heck is going on? So I sat down and I did it for her, and it took me 30 seconds and she didn't understand how it worked. So we went to, we got online, we looked at some things. We found a website called thebackpack.com, and we got a year's worth of curriculum with textbooks that are old. They're pre-Common Core. So I had to reteach her what she did know, but no Common Core. So we had to start over addition and subtraction. And she ended up having to do 7 years of schooling in 4 years, or in 3 years, to graduate on time. But we were able to do it. And we did it with those books from thebackpack.com. She graduated earlier than everybody, but only by a month. But it was still early. But every year her test scores went up. She was doing better and better and better. So luckily she was motivated for the most part. And the books that we got her pretty much taught her everything she needed to know. I was there. She was old enough to understand, so I was there to help her when she needed it, but it was fairly easy for me because she was older. My younger kids now, I have a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old and a 2-year-old. My 5-year-old is doing reading, he's writing, he does addition and subtraction, and we have started multiplication, and he hasn't even been considered starting kindergarten yet. I mean, he's not going to go to public school, so he's not going to be in kindergarten, but that wouldn't start until the end of this summer, but he's already into multiplication by now. And my 3-year-old is starting to learn her letters, and my 2-year-old is, starting to learn his colors. So everything we do and every day is some sort of an activity of learning So whatever we do, we just make sure it's a learning process. We don't always sit at a table. We don't always say, okay, now it's school time, let's sit at the table. We just incorporate school into everything we do. So I mean, that's basically it. Is there any questions?
I will ask people to put your questions in the Q&A. I imagine that a lot of people have questions for Leslie. I'm going to also put, I will do it, or Leslie, if you want to do it, Leslie's email in the chat. So if you are, you know, listening to Leslie talk about homeschooling and want to connect with her and pick her brain, or get some resources, I know that she would be more than happy to help you in any way that she can. You know, as you heard, she has kids from 2 to 30 years old. So she's definitely run the full spectrum. And I would imagine, Leslie, that with 8 kids, I know I've only got 4 and they're all very different. They're all very unique learners and have their own strengths and weaknesses. And so from your 8 kids, you obviously have encountered that times 2. So encourage people to reach out to Leslie. Seth, I know that you are very much encouraging of parents to homeschool. And you have an interesting perspective. I don't know if you are a dad. I don't think I've seen that. I think you are. Okay. So you're not a parent, but you are a teacher and you are seeing behind the scenes every single day. And so being such a proponent of homeschooling, I'd love for you to talk about that. And I know that you have some creative resources for parents, and that's kind of what your mission right now is to help parents make that shift to homeschooling. So I'd love to give you the floor to talk about that.
Yes, thanks, Julie. First of all, I'd like to just piggyback on what Leslie was saying about homeschooling. Homeschooling is challenging. Actually, part of my backstory that I forgot to give you is I am a teacher, but I was a homeschool graduate. I was homeschooled all the way through high school, and it turned out really well. And what I want to encourage people is, yes, homeschooling is hard, and finding alternatives to school is hard, but there are 1,000,001 reasons to get your kids out of those government schools. We've talked about the terrible moral messages that are going out in schools, and that's not by accident. It is a chosen direction of the public schools. I have been told by respected teacher leaders. Actually, I recently left teaching. I've changed careers because I just could not in good conscience continue it. And when I was telling some of my coworkers some of the reasons why I was leaving, what I was told by a very respected teacher was, well, if you really feel that way, Seth, maybe this career isn't for you, because these are the values the state has decided we represent. State-sanctioned values are being pushed through the schools on purpose, and they are not the values of many of us. So there's that reason. And then Leslie was talking about how her child was falling behind. There are tons of reasons why schools are not pushing kids as fast as they need to be, sometimes even holding them back. And so you're not getting the best education you could for your child. You, as the parent, are every bit as prepared to give your child a decent education if you are willing to commit to it. And the great thing is, Washington is actually a reasonably friendly state to alternatives to public school. There are lots of things that can make that really, once you get into the swing of things, actually pretty easy to do. Essentially, in Washington, all you need to do is file a declaration of intent annually with your local school district saying that you intend to homeschool your children and which children. And you need to do that either in consultation with a certificated person. So somebody with some sort of teaching certificate just talks to you every so often and helps you design the curriculum and oversees the testing. Or if you happen to have 45 quarter hours of college under your belt, which is essentially equivalent to an associate's degree, you don't even need that. You can do it yourself. So it's actually pretty easy to set up home-based instruction, whether you're doing that in a group or in a or just for you and your family. And the final thing that I wanted to make a point about is that according to the RCWs that that govern home-based instruction in Washington, the actual verbiage of one of the clauses in there is that the legislature, I'm not going to quote it directly, paraphrase, but the legislature says that they recognize that homeschooling is different and maybe less structured and more experiential than a typical classroom environment. And the words that they use is that the nature and quantity of the instructional activities that are engaged in during home-based instruction shall be liberally construed. Those are the words, shall be liberally construed. So, it was said earlier that every moment of every day can be a learning experience. According to the laws of the state of Washington, you as a home-based instructor are perfectly welcome to do that. If your child gets up in the morning and feels like reading a book, that can be construed as education. When I spent time outside as a kid and I held a blade of grass out and let a slug eat it and kind of felt the scrapers inside, I understood some of the science that I was being taught in a much deeper way than I would have just out of the book. That was a learning experience for me. So you have the flexibility under the laws of the state of Washington to work your way into it. And I would like to encourage parents who are planning to just start, go ahead and take time to celebrate the new lifestyle that you're jumping into. Take some time to enjoy the flexibility and find your way into it. Now, you do have to find some structure in there. You know, if you just keep it completely wide open, kids are human. They will try not to learn at some point. But take some time to feel the joy of the flexibility that you have, and let your child direct some of it yourself, and then you can start to tailor it. And later on, I would love to say some things about how to find curriculum and support if you're still struggling with it. But I want to start with just that word of encouragement. You can do it if you're choosing to homeschool. And there are many other opportunities out there like micro schools and homeschool co-ops. You just have to find them. And that's not as hard as it used to be with the internet. And so there are options out there, and they are, you know, it will be hard, but it is doable.
You kind of make me want to homeschool. I mean, I don't have any kids to homeschool right now, but you know, it's very encouraging. So I hope that people that are listening to you tonight or listening to the replay hear what you're saying and feel that empowerment to do homeschool. And I'm excited for you to share some of the resources that you're talking about.
Really quick, Julie, before you're done there, sorry to interrupt, but
no worries.
I wanted to jump this in. Also, I will be posting the RCWs governing the home-based instruction in Washington. I'll be posting them on my Twitter account tomorrow morning. My Twitter handle is @RogueTCH. I'll be posting those, and the RCWs are really easy to read, actually. Who knew we could write legislation that was easy to read? But it will give you a strong idea of what your parameters are and how to proceed. So it will be available there for you if you want it. You just have to find me on Twitter and I'll post it.
I'll put a link in the chat to your Twitter so people can go look there. Joy has had her hand up. So Jeannie, I'm going to catch Joy first and then I'll come back to you.
Just quickly, I want to piggyback on some of the things that Seth said. First off, I homeschooled my daughter after being a public school teacher for her senior year. It was fantastic, and it is totally, totally doable. One of the things that I want to mention, AnnMarie put the link in the conversation about the Washington Homeschool Organization. They have a great class for parents if you feel like you just need a jumping off point. A lot of our parents out here in Kitsap have taken that class and they got a lot out of it. One of the things that you want to make sure that you do, don't let your district's registrar tell you what the rules are. We find a lot of times that they're making up rules as they go along. And if you follow their rules that are not in line with the law, you're setting a precedent to make it harder for the people behind you. Don't do that. When in doubt, reach out to Seth, reach out to any of us on this panel, reach out to other homeschool parents. They are phenomenal, phenomenal volumes of knowledge, and they will make sure that you don't set yourself up for failure. And don't be afraid to do this. My vice chair, AnnMarie, she doesn't like to brag, but I'll tell on her. She's sitting here with me. She is a full-time mom. She works full-time, and she traditionally homeschools her kids. Reach out to your network. I teach English and history with her kids, and I'm adding art to that next year because that's another part of my world. And I'm really excited to do that with her kids again next year. And you have the people around you that teach trig or know trig really well if your child is interested in that. They know chemistry, they know science, they know math. Math is not in my wheelhouse. I do addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. That's it. So reach out, and you can trade with parents. If your strength is English and history like me, but not math, trade with someone. It is so doable. And also part of the law is if you choose that your kids can take electives on school campus, that is up to you. But know the fact that they are still going to be subject to some of the things that you don't like if you go to a public school setting for your electives. Co-ops are great for that. So I just wanted to add that in because I want this to be successful for everybody. It's so much fun. Seth, I love your enthusiasm. It's fantastic. Thank you, Julie.
Yep. Thanks for adding that, Joy. That was great. Jeannie.
I just wanted to add that even though our experience, our negative experience with homeschooling, there were a lot of factors to that. This was in the middle of the shutdown, so my daughter was isolated and she was incredibly lonely, and it was a new experience doing homeschooling. So that I don't want my negative experience to influence other people to say, oh, maybe we shouldn't do that. Please try it. I'm glad we tried it. So, and there were aspects of it that were great. It's just the learning remotely and the isolation of it all was just too much for her. So.
And I think it's okay for parents to realize, some parents, homeschooling is not for everybody. I really don't think homeschooling is for me. I mean, I would do it in, given where we are right now, it would be really difficult and I wouldn't like it, but I would do it over public education. But I just want people to know that you don't have to feel guilty if you don't want to homeschool your kids or you don't feel enthused about that. But if you do, and if you are willing, and if you're just I will suffer through it before I'll let my kids go to public school. We want to help support you and give you the resources to do that. AnnMarie, I see you've got your hand up.
I do. I wanted. Oh, can you turn yours? We're sitting next to each other. Can you tell? So what I wanted to add was that, and I say this a lot when we do presentations, you weren't teaching your children before they went to school Monday through Friday, 9 to 3 for 180 days a year. That's not how it happens, right? They pop out, they show up, you adopt them however it works, and you begin teaching them. You don't say, oh, we're not potty training, it's Saturday. And so you are your child's first teacher. And as overwhelming as it can feel, it's not impossible. So for my kids, and I have 2 teens, so, my house is fun. And I work with toddlers. That's my job. I work in early intervention, birth to 3. So I run the gamut of all of it and supporting families across all aspects of education. And I loved being a public education, special education teacher. I loved it. But you won't catch me in the buildings anymore. I won't be doing that. So I'll work for nonprofit. But we do social studies and culture and civics, not during the day. Because of what we do for Moms for Liberty, my kids get to be involved in civics all the time. And they actually crave it now. They want to be a part of what we're doing on a regular basis. Both of my kids are adopted from China, and my daughter is a fierce American child. She's been able to walk on the Yorktown battlefield, and she was so excited as a 7-year-old that that's where we won, you know? So she is very proud of being an American. But we also do culture stuff and social studies, and we do that by researching, you know, traditions and music and art and food. And that's a Saturday night, you know, that's a family time for us. And my kids come up with recipes. We cook them together. I made horchata for the first time. That stuff is good. And, you know, I had never made it before. And so I'm learning with them. So when Leslie and, you know, talks about, oh, it's just something that happens organically, you're already doing this stuff in your homes, you know. Math is baking and cooking, you know, but math is also figuring out how to change a tire on your bicycle, or, you know, leveling out your, you know, the skates on your skateboard. So there's lots of things that our kids can be learning. Have them grow some vegetables in a garden, in a pot. You know, I mean, all these things are part of building the human that needs to go out into the world and be a productive, positive citizen. So it's not just, oh, reading, writing, math. We wish schools would do that so we wouldn't have to be so creative. But you know what? I would give my kids this education. I'm a single mom, you know, I mean, it's why I color my hair. But, you know, I mean, there's a lot on my plate, but I am, you know, we in Kitsap County are constantly trying to support the families who are like, I think this is a little too much. And I'm like, you don't have to be me. Good Lord, don't be me, but be you. What's most comfortable for you? And how do we get that to happen? So that's what I wanted to add.
I wanted to say, my daughter, AnnMarie was saying how her daughter gets involved in Moms for Liberty, and that's how she does her civics and stuff. My daughter ended up being the chapter president of a Turning Point chapter. And that's where she got her civics. And that's where she got, my husband was on the campaign trail, and she would go with Turning Point to the campaign events. And so she would be getting involved in the politics. And then we write our monthly publication, History. So she was raised with learning history of our country with our monthly publication. And there's a lot of homeschool families that get our subscription, so they use that as their history. My son found a caterpillar outside, and we brought it inside, and we watched the caterpillar do what it needs to do and turn into a moth. That's homeschooling. Just the other day, he came to me, was talking about bubbles. And I said, do you know what makes a bubble? And he said, well, it's water and it's soap. And I said, yeah, but you need air to blow into the bubble to make the bubble. And he's like, but when the bubble pops and the air just goes out. And I said, exactly. You know, I said, that's our science lesson for today. You know, so, you know, it's just everyday things that happen. And when your kids are naturally, they naturally learn things. They naturally want to learn things. It just happens. And it's fairly easy. Say, well, that's a lesson for today. So there you go.
Can I jump in on that really quick?
Of course.
You know, Leslie was talking about finding those lessons in the day. And if people are listening to this and thinking it sounds maybe a bit loosey-goosey, I can speak as a teacher that it's not that different from what a teacher is doing. Teachers are supposed to hit certain standards. And then the teacher gets to kind of decide how they hit those standards. There are certain things that the state says, hey, your kid has to learn some of this stuff. And then the teacher says, you know what, we're going to hit this standard in this way. And then there are times where the teacher in the classroom will kind of shift gears because there's something going on with the day, whether that's a kid asks a good question or something like that. And then the teacher they'll retroactively say, you know what, we hit this standard. That wasn't the lesson plan for the day. We didn't have like a pre-built assessment for it, but you know what, we hit it. And then tomorrow, maybe I'll do a quick assessment on that thing that we talked about in class today. Teachers are freewheeling quite often in the classroom. So it's not that different from what the student is getting in school to say, hey, we just talked about bubbles. That's a standard that we hit. We're learning about, surface tension or whatever. And then maybe you build on that. So even if it seems loose, you're still doing a lot of what happens in school by following those things. You just get to be more flexible and more opportunistic than a teacher gets to be in a classroom because it's just your kids.
Sorry, I started reading the Q&A. Also, just another reminder, if you guys have questions for our panel, go ahead and drop those in the Q&A and I will be pulling from that to ask some of those live for our panelists as you have them. But that was great, Seth, and great information, because I think a lot of people probably wonder, I know I would, is like, how do you structure the day? And it do you sit your kid at a desk for 6 hours, and is that how you do it? And so I think it's really helpful to hear the different feedback from and ideas from all of you guys. I want to turn to Brad for a moment. It's fun to watch Brad's facial expressions as y'all are talking. But when Seth was talking about the RCWs and kind of the Washington state laws around homeschooling, Brad, can you maybe expand upon that a little bit more and sort of what Washington's laws are around maybe not even just homeschool, but alternatives to public schools?
Well, I really appreciate so much what Seth said. Hopefully I'll get Julie to where you want me to go. But Seth is correct. Washington state is rarely friendly or fairly friendly rather than rarely, fairly friendly with homeschooling and alternatives to education in Washington state. So that is that is a plus. If I may, Julie, I would like to get to one thing that Seth said, that a teacher said to him, well, maybe this profession just isn't for you, because Washington state is now established or putting out there their values, their morals that we're going to teach from the Washington state classrooms. And I just thought in my head, what a bunch of garbage. And I just wish that every person in Washington state who shares our values would feel the same and stand up and say, we're not taking that. There's just no way we're taking that. And we're going to stand up. Let me just go to Article 1 of the Washington State Constitution. Article 1, Section 1, political power. All political power is inherent in the who? The people, not the government. And governments derive their just powers from the consent of the governed and are established to protect and maintain individual. That's every individual in Washington state's rights. That's you. And so I wanted to share that the Washington State Constitution and the U.S. Constitution both say that the U.S. Constitution is the supreme law of the land. Our founding fathers, those 56 men who signed the Declaration of Independence and went on to have the Constitutional Convention and wrote our Constitution. First, they built our government, and then they looked at it and they go, whoa, whoa, whoa. That gives the government way too much power. And they followed that up with the 10 amendments, which are the Bill of Rights, which are your Bill of Rights. And you need to know them, you need to stand up for them, and you need to stand firmly for them. And just like my favorite book says, when you've done everything you can do to stand, stand, keep fighting back. And so thank you, Seth, for what you said. Thank you, Jeannie and AnnMarie, for what you guys shared. Leslie, you know, so true. I mean, I took my daughters, I have 2 biological daughters and an adopted son, and I took them out and I showed them how to change a tire. I took them out and showed them how to change the oil in a car. And, you know, right now I've talked recently to several people who represent unions, labor unions, and they say we're so frustrated. I just heard the other day somebody who is into plumbing says kids come to school, and when I tell them, hey, take this pipe bender and this piece of conduit and go bend it to a 30-degree angle so we can get it around this corner. Huh? They don't know how. So we as parents can show them what is a 30-degree angle and how to take that particular tool and bend a piece of pipe to 30 degrees. That's great math lessons. That's great lessons to prepare them for life. So you guys are rock stars, and everybody in the state of Washington, especially those listening now, needs to grab on to what you're saying and get involved, stand firm, stand strong, and know that you are your children's teachers. And we not only are we going to teach them, like Jeannie, like you said, and also AnnMarie, not just academics, we're going to teach them what's in our heart, what's in our soul, the values and the principles and the morals that we, our family, hold. And we're going to teach them through our actions, more than our words, through our actions, how to stand for them and fight for them, and to make sure that we protect, as the Declaration of Independence talks about, our posterity, our children from this generation to the next and the next and the next. So thank you, Julie, for the question. I may not have gotten to you where you wanted me to go, but Wash state law does protect you for homeschooling, alternative schooling, private school. Let's fight for that, to keep that. And that's exactly what I choose to do with you.
See, now you go in the best place. It doesn't matter if it was where I wanted you to go. You go somewhere good. And I always love when you speak, because I always want to stand up and give you a standing ovation. And gosh, Washington needs Brad Klippert in that OSPI office, please. Alex, I see you've got your hand up.
Yeah, so I'm not going to immediately talk about my work with Gays Against Groomers for a second. I just want to tell every parent out there, unlike some of these wonderful ladies who have different home circumstances who are able to homeschool, I had to homeschool 2 of my children in the middle of COVID. Me and my wife had 2 jobs involved in commercial trucking, and it was, you might think that that's impossible. Thankfully, I had a company that was pretty lenient with letting me bring my kids in the truck, and I homeschooled them for an entire year in my semi. So if you think you can't do it, if you think it's impossible, and I caught them up on 3 years worth of academics, which is why I also would never teach again in my life. But that's my point, is that even if you have the most difficult circumstances, you can find a way if it matters to you. And just like I think Leslie said, get your kids independently tested, because the schools lie to you. They tell you, we already knew that Washington state standard is already behind the national average standard. So you can just say, if your kid is top of their class, they're still probably behind, unless they are an avid reader, very sharp. They're probably behind anyway. So just kind of calculate that into your stuff. But to everyone who spoke, great job. And I just want to put that out there, is as hard as your life is and as complicated as your job situation is, there is a way to do this, even if it's only for a little while, to just kind of course correct. So.
And, I think you and Jeannie both, chose to homeschool as a result of the COVID shutting down schools. And that really brought a huge awareness of how much our kids are now behind because of that shutdown. And to add insult to injury, we're not even focused on academics anyway. We're indoctrinating kids. So these kids have, it's just a mess for these kids who were behind because of COVID. And now they're not even getting reading, writing, and arithmetic, which is just making for, I cringe when I think about what these children are going to be like as adults if we don't take corrective action now. So, that's why it's important also to be talking about what's going on in the government schools, the public schools. I try to call them government schools because that's what they are. But before we kind of shift gears into the tools and things that you need to know about the government schools, if that's where your students are going to land, does anybody on our panel have anything else they want to talk about as far as like homeschooling and alternative schooling options before we move on?
I'll just say, even if you decide that you have to do it for whatever reason, I'm here. You can always get a hold of me at any time. So call me, email me, or anything to get the help that you need.
Thanks, Leslie.
I was gonna I was going to add that in Kitsap County, we have a lot of hybrid options that are coming around. And so those are like 2 days at home, 3 days in the classroom. And they have become very popular with a lot of families. Our co-ops do that. We offer school choice fairs a couple times a year, which was kind of a fluke over a year ago, where I was like, let's just get some of these people together so families could come and check this out and figure out what it looks like. And the first one we had over 100 people at it, and we were not expecting that. And then we've done 4 or 5, I think, total. And we always get about 100 families that come out. So they're very curious about what this is and how can they do that. And we just get all of the groups that are willing to come. And we have a restaurant here locally that donates the space to us. So we're not paying for it. So it's free for families to come out. It's free for those organizations to present, and everybody just walks around. It's a fair, and they can ask questions. They can learn information. They can learn about curriculum. I bring a lot of my curriculum out. So parents can get an idea of what it looks like. And, we've had quite a few families pivot in the middle of the year and go, you know what? No, thank you. And our largest group in Kitsap County that's leaving public ed is secondary ed. Our secondary ed kids don't want to be in the toxic buildings, and they are pleading with their parents to get them out. So we are trying to be even more creative in how do we support them. They're feeling alone. They are having a hard time making friends because, again, they're in a building with 600 students and they feel alone. I was talking to Joy this past weekend saying, you know what, I think it's because these kids have grit, right? They're not willing to be resilient and just bend and flow with things that internally do not feel appropriate or okay. And these kids have the grit to stand up and say, this isn't okay. And so it's a conflicting issue with them all day being in these buildings where you have a good amount of adults telling you, this is how you're supposed to think, this is how you're supposed to think, this is how you're supposed to think. Yeah. And your body internally goes, no, I have autonomy. Thanks for playing. And so our secondary kids are really standing firm on this. And so Joy and I are constantly looking at ways to support them. I had a kiddo come over here on Sunday. I've never really met him, but he needed a friend. And so he played my son's drum kit with them. We baked cookies, they played board games. He just needed some connection, and we need to be doing that as a community, I mean, and I don't want a village. I want a tribe. A village usually has an idiot. Sorry. A tribe, I can kind of, and so anyway, so we're working on creating those tribes for our kids. So
I love that. When do you guys do your next education fair?
No, August 19th. Don't ask Joy. She doesn't know.
I
August 19th at Maynard's in Silverdale, and it'll be 12 to 2.
And if you do not live in Kitsap County, that is okay. I've been told you can still go and you can get ideas. And if you don't have the resources in your county that you're finding at the Kitsap County Moms for Liberty Education Fair, these gals will help connect you in your community.
And Leslie and Seth, you're more than welcome. If you want a table, reach out. We'll get you a table.
That's awesome. Brad, I see you've got your hand up.
Just very quickly, Julie, wanted to thank you for your most recent family guests that you've invited to the webinar today. They're behind you on the chairs, on the stools. Thanks for inviting the cat. And, but I just want to say thank you to the homeschoolers. 14 years in the legislature, the Homeschool Association was fantastic. Every year they brought us pies. They were a very influential group in the state of Washington. Keep up the good work. If you're new to homeschooling and you're not a part of the Homeschool Association, I strongly encourage you to become part of that voice to make it stronger and larger. And we have a blast. I used to sing them. We'd meet in the rotunda at lunchtime every year, and I'd make them sing God Bless America as loud as they possibly could. Well, that interrupted other offices. So the last time I was with them, they said, you can't do that. You're interrupting us. So we sang God Bless America whispering. And it was a blast. We had a blast. So love you guys. I'm the whole school association. Keep up the great work.
That's awesome. Thank you for interjecting that. Seth.
Yeah, before we're done, I would like to go over just a quick rundown of some great resources that people can do if they are just jumping into homeschooling.
Awesome.
Let me see if I can figure out how to put my hand down now that I put it up.
I think I can lower it for you.
It's
Okay.
going up a little bit small on my screen. But first of all, Brad and somebody else earlier mentioned the Washington Homeschool Organization. Fantastic organization. First of all, as Brad said, hugely influential. They fight every day in lobbying and organizing to maintain people's right to homeschool in this state. They're a big part of the reason why it is so homeschool friendly. I'm going to post their website in the chat right now. But beyond their lobbying and their advocacy, they have a lot of resources that you can use as a homeschooler. They have ideas for like what kinds of standards you need to teach your kids. Like what, if you're sitting there wondering, I don't even know what my kid is supposed to know, Washington Homeschool Organization can help. Washington Homeschool Organization also helps to pair you up with those certificated people. That one isn't as well developed at this point. That's something that I'm working on myself, trying to figure out ways to make it easier, but there are directories on the WHO website to help you pair up with somebody who has that teaching certificate, who can keep you in compliance with the Washington laws around needing to consult. And I mean, consulting with a certificated teacher who is friendly to homeschooling, I mean, that takes a lot of the pressure off of you as a homeschooling parent. They can really hold your hand and help you with that. And then also, if you go to something like WHO, or there are other organizations like that, and that's, and you're still struggling with it, a really simple thing that actually my mother did when she was starting homeschooling, I was just talking with her about this on this weekend, go to homeschool curriculum catalogs. You'll probably be shopping homeschool curriculum catalogs anyway. I will post a few good ones in the chat in a moment. But one of the great things you can do is when you go through a homeschool curriculum catalog, that will start to give you an idea of what kids need to know at each grade level, because usually they will be packaged by grade level and you'll see what they're learning. And that'll give you a basic framework to work off of when you're just getting started and you need some direction. Also, there are several authors out there and books about homeschooling. I just realized one of them is in my stack that my mic is sitting on, so I can't show it to you. But I will certainly be posting a lot of those over the next couple of weeks on my Twitter, so you can find those resources there. And many of those books will give you sort of a grade by grade, year by year breakdown of what your kid needs to know. And then the final thing that I wanted to say is, we've talked a lot about homeschooling, but if you decide, I encourage you to try it. I really encourage you to try it. I think you'll find that there's magic there that you wouldn't have expected. But there are some kids who are just way too much of a social butterfly to sit at home, or parents who just really, teaching isn't their thing. There are other options, especially now that parents are starting to organize. You can find lots, an increasing number of homeschool co-ops. I know several people who are parts of big co-ops that are organized through local churches. Also micro schools where groups of parents get together and like hire one elementary school teacher and they all meet at somebody's house. The teacher is there and teaches them. And those are becoming more and more common. And actually a great resource for homeschooling or micro schools or co-ops or anything like that is Facebook. There's lots of people in the alternative school space who organize and network on Facebook. You just have to do some searching around and network a little bit, and you can probably find somebody in your local area who's plugged in with those groups, and they can help you find those things. But final thing, as many people have said, I'm very happy to help you. My direct messages are open on Twitter. So just send me a direct message if you have questions or concerns about alternative schooling. I don't know everything about it. I'm not a perfect expert, but if you have questions, I will certainly do my best to either find out the answer or find somebody who can find an answer for you.
That's awesome. Thank you, Seth. So that was a great way to kind of wrap up our homeschool alternative school options. And certainly we could do the whole Zoom on that particular topic. But I do want to go over to some of the public school options, and just want to let you guys know that while we were coming up on this event this evening, we realized that there is so much content that we're not going to be able to get to tonight. So we are working on putting together sort of a back to school event that will be a virtual event. These virtual events seem to be easy for people. They can do it while they're, doing laundry or making dinner or what have you. And so it makes it easy for people to attend. Plus they are recorded. So stay tuned for date. It'll be probably late August when we put that together, and we'll have probably a lot of the same people that are here tonight will be joining us for that as well. So if you feel like we didn't get to everything, it's okay. We're coming back to you in about a month. So I want to shift over to public schools, what's going on, what you need to know, and some tools for you to help navigate the public school system so that you know how to communicate with the school board or the administrators, the principal, the teachers that are working with your kids, because you do have a lot of rights. You are the primary stakeholder in your child's life, even if the people in, a majority of the people. And I do want to put the word out that there are a lot of really good teachers in the government school system, and they are really in a hard spot. And I hear from a lot of them, they feel like they're kind of lumped in with this group of woke teachers. And so we do want to acknowledge that there are those good teachers out there, and thank you to those people who are being a light in a dark place, because you are certainly giving to these students such a gift that they need in these crazy schools right now. So I see Alex has got her hand up, which is great, because I was going to kick it over to her first. And Alex, I want you to, I don't know what you have that you want to say, but could you also talk about just some of the things that parents who have kids in the public schools, not necessarily curriculum based, but just like, what are the things parents need to know about? What can parents do with their kids to prepare them to go into this kind of toxic environment of public education?
Okay. Thank you so much for coming over to me first, I guess. The first thing I wanted to, my response was going to be, I'm a little bit more of a hard line on the teachers right now. I'll say this to any parent out there: don't trust your teacher. I don't care how good they are, how much you've loved them for how long. F teachers. If they're not working with you, if they're not giving you an insight into their classroom, have a conversation with them. See if they'll message you privately. And if they will not cooperate, don't trust them, because they're part of the problem. If they're not willing to anonymously share curriculum, if they're not willing to at least try to fight this from within, then they're part of the problem and I have no patience for them. So I'm just going to say that. Very brutal, but it's honest. So moving on to what Julia has asked me to talk about. So the number one thing I want Washington parents to understand is that this is a top-down issue. There's no place in the entire state where you're going to be able to avoid discussions of LGBTQ curriculum, social emotional learning. That's in every single school, no matter where you go. So that's the first thing you need to just understand. The other thing you need to understand is that there's going to be takeaways during class time for social emotional learning, and you need to learn when that is. You need to specifically request that your child be removed from that. And you need to really form a really tight connection with your kids, which sounds easy and it sounds obvious, but it's not. And when I say you need to really have a good connection with your kids, you need to have a really good connection with your kids. You need to trust them to take video and audio of incidents at school. They need to know what to look for, things like that. You have to understand that this is not a sex ed problem, although sex ed is atrocious. The problem is that just because you opt your kids out of sex ed doesn't mean it's not going to come up in every single other class that they have, because teachers will bring this up in the most wild and outlandish ways. I've had parents email me pictures of their kids' math class, and it comes up in their math, in their word problems for math. So this comes in at every angle. The other uncomfortable thing that I'm going to tell people is that whatever your beliefs are, whatever your attitudes are around LGBTQ issues, if you're not going to homeschool and you're going to have your kids in public school, if that's the route you're going down, you need to understand that you choosing to not have these conversations about these issues, you've lost. And I say that with all sincerity, not trying to be rude to you. But if you are refusing to have these conversations because you think that they're awkward, because you don't want to talk about gay people, or you don't want to talk about the trans issue, you don't want to talk about this or that, they're going to hear it at school from other students. They're going to hear it certainly from the teachers and the counselors, and you can't shut all of it out. So my advice is you need to understand as a parent, sit down with your spouse, or if you're a single parent, sit down, do your research about what these issues are. We have resources at Gays Against Groomers that can help you, but you need to sit down and think about what your values are and what you want your kids to believe. And I'm not telling you to brainwash your kids, but think about the values and the beliefs that you want them to have around these issues, and then sit down and have a very frank, age-appropriate discussion with them about it. Because if you don't, then they're only going to hear one side of it. And so this is particularly useful if you have very outgoing students. It certainly helps if they're smart. It certainly helps if they're outgoing, because they'll be the ones that will push back on the teachers. And teachers do not like it. Trust me, they don't like when students push back on them. If they're getting a lot of pushback from students, they will back off because it puts them in a really awkward position. So that's a couple things I would say specifically. If you want me to go into specific details about kind of what a conversation like that might look like, I'm happy to do that. But for now, those are the major things you need to understand. And the last one I would add, which is general for everything, if at all possible, do not let your kids on social media at all, period. No social media. That includes any gaming. I love to game. Any game that allows for in-game communications, no, don't do it. That includes things like Reddit, YouTube, all of that. Take it away. And if you can possibly stand to keep, not lose your sanity, take their internet away. My kids don't have access to the internet at all, period. No Wi-Fi allowed in the house. So, and it's really important that you understand that a lot of this stuff isn't just coming in through the school. The school does encourage it and help it, but the school also gives them resources that puts them online and tells them to go online where, other organizations and other people can do things that schools can't do. They will tell them things that the schools cannot do and will not do, but that they're very much for. So take the power away from the school by not letting your kids on the internet, if at all possible. And if you do, get these like the strongest parental controls you possibly can and obsessively check them. That would be my best advice.
That's really great advice, Alex. I think I have to think that a lot of people listening to you say that right now are thinking, how am I going to like take away the social media, the cell phone, the internet that my kid already has? So first of all, if your kid is young enough that they don't have that yet, don't go there. Did you have to remove anything from your kids, or did they've never had it? Do you have tips for that?
We did have to remove it. Buckle up and stay strong. Because it's awful, not just for them, but for you. But really, you know, it's hard. It is hard. We got rid of the Wi-Fi capability on their phones. Was the biggest one, and that solved a lot of it. Is taking away the phone's ability to have Wi-Fi access. And then the other one was take their Chromebooks. Like a lot of school districts use Chromebooks, and kids get very creative with those Chromebooks. Take them away from them and lock them up if you can, because it's awful. And then also check the browser history on those Chromebooks every single night. And also every student can use another student's login. So if you think your kid is doing that workaround, go to your school's IT and ask them on the individual Chromebook if any other user login has been used, because that will then tell you if your child is using, by being smart, using one of their friends' logins in order to hide the content that they are watching on that Chromebook. Because then they'll log into their account and they'll show you, and it'll be all their schoolwork, but then they'll log in with their friend's account and it'll be porn, you know, music, whatever they don't want you to see. So just be aware of those types of things. But yeah, it's brutal. If your kids already have it, it's going to be a fight. And remember, you're the parent, you're not their friend. And at the end of the day, what you say goes. So that's, remember that and just have a drink.
That's great. Have a drink. Thanks, Alex. That was good. Okay, so we've got 3 hands up. I'm going to go in order that I saw you guys pop up, and so I'll kick it over to Joy.
I have to stop laughing at my friend Alex. She's so right. If it's not your kids, it's the public education system. They all drive you to drink. I'm just kidding. So I want to piggyback on a lot of what Alex just said. First off, where SEL is concerned, it is baked into everything. You cannot fully opt your child out of social emotional learning. It would mean you have to remove them from school, from public education. So please know that as a parent. You absolutely have a say in opting your child out of specific lessons. But here's the caveat. Many of the lessons that they use have videos that they access on the internet in the classroom, and you don't know what those are, and the school districts are very reluctant to let you figure out what that is. One of your best tools as a parent is a public records request, a PRR. Use FOIA's Freedom of Information Act. It is the law to let you have access to curriculum. Now, one of the things that we run into is they like to say, especially with the comprehensive sex education, SEL, and a few others, that they don't actually have a textbook. Again, a lot of it is online. Or they will make you come to the district office and they have a binder, one binder that everybody is accessing because everything else is online. Push back. It is your right to know that. And the internet is a great tool for you. If you want to know about second steps or about any of these curriculums that are out there, and by the way, they're all owned by a very small number of people, and they've all been, pardon me, bastardized from what they used to be. Mm-hmm. Social emotional learning is the weaponization of empathy. Social emotional learning is the operating system. You'll hear Deb Philman say this, and then they plug in all the other programs, CSE, queer theory, all of the other things. And I'm here to tell you that the worst of the worst is coming in the form of community schools. The CDC is now in public education, and it is like nothing you have ever seen. Second steps, they have a graphic that has parents in the second to last ring in this circle about who's important in a child's life. The school is in the center with your students. The community school model from the CDC moves parents to number 10, and you are invited to participate. We all know what that means. Stay at arm's length. Don't do it. Insist that you are part of this. Ask the questions and don't take no for an answer. We have a PRR ombudsman at the state level with the AG, and I know working with Ferguson's office can be a little bit tricky sometimes, but use those resources because they assume that we're stupid, that we don't know the law, that we don't know Article 1, Section 1 of our state constitution, that we don't know that we can use PRRs. And some of them are trying to make PRRs harder by charging for them. And I do know, Julie, we talked, I think, 2 Smackdown sessions ago about how there is legislation in play right now that would make it so that we can't get this information. That should be a huge signal to parents that they're trying to keep secrets from you. The next thing that I would really recommend, you need to make school board and district policy your subject matter expertise. It is online, it is all there. You need to know what those policies are. You need to question those policies. Also, school boards don't like you to know this, but because of Robert's Rules of Order, you can, from the gallery during public comment, propose policy. Even if it doesn't become policy, it forces their hand to take that clear through the policy process. It forces them to listen to parents. So don't be afraid to do that. If you're going to use that tool, don't telegraph that you're going to use that tool. Only tell the person that you want to have second your motion. Don't broadcast that. What they will do is they will shut down the school board meeting and say that they're going to Zoom. They'll make up a reason. So don't let them have that control. The other thing is document, document, document. Keep good records. If you have a phone call with a teacher or a staff member or a board member or with an administrator, after that phone call, follow it up with an email so that that phone call becomes public record. You say, you know, dear Mr. or Mrs. So-and-so, based on our conversation that we had today, state the time even, be very, very specific. Here is what I understand from our phone call. If I do not hear back from you, give them 48 hours or so, 72, if it's a weekend, a little longer, then I understand that my understanding of our conversation is exactly what I wrote. If they do not respond to you, that's an answer and an affirmative. That means that your understanding is correct. Once that is part of public record, that is admissible in court if this is something that becomes a legal issue. So it's really important that you do this. If you need help, one of the things that we love about Moms for Liberty is we have lots and lots of legal resources. We can't guarantee that they're going to take your cases, but there are a lot of entities, especially here in Washington. Pacific Justice Institute is a fantastic resource. We can put the link in the chat and you can actually go and request a review of your situation. So make sure that you do that. And if something comes up, don't be afraid to file grievances against your school board or against the school district. And if you don't like how it turns out, you need to ask for an appeal and you need to appeal with the state. Chances are they're going to just say everything's fine, but they need to know that parents know their rights. And one last thing, make sure that your kids know their rights. A child cannot be penalized in their grades. They cannot be penalized in their attendance because they don't agree with some lesson that has been taught or something that a teacher has taught them is, you know, the gospel, so to speak, figuratively. Please keep an eye on that. If they push back on that, they have broken the law, and you need to make sure that you take a stand on that. And don't be just keyboard warriors. You know, Brad, you spoke at the last, or during the last Smackdown. I felt like cheering the entire day, or the entire evening. You called us Minutemen and women, and to stand up and defend our children and defend our rights. And I thought maybe you had just gotten back from Philadelphia from our summit with us. You were so exciting. We have to do this, and we are winning every single day. Don't let the MSM tell you differently. Don't let people on the opposition tell you differently, because they're lying to you, and they're nothing but a bunch of bullies. Stand up to them. The minute you do, all of their power is gone. All of it. So don't let them take that power from you as parents, because only you have a right to determine the upbringing of your child. Also, Missouri, AnnMarie just reminded me, Missouri Attorney General is going after Panorama Education for the surveys that are being given. The reason is it breaks PPRA law, the privacy laws, without explicit written instruction or permission from parents. You cannot ask a child about their religion, their politics, their home life, their sexuality, any of that. So keep an eye out for that, because that is something that is in the works. Now I'll be quiet.
That is great. That is actually great news. That would be a huge thing.
Giant.
Yeah. And, you know, I just want to kind of piggyback off of, you know, something that you said, knowledge is power, right? And so for parents, you know, you have to dig through your school district website. You have to look at, attend school board meetings. A lot of them are still on Zoom. So if you can't physically get there, attend the Zoom meetings, read their agenda, read their meeting minutes. It is so important. And this is, the schools really hope that you won't dig for this information. It's there, and you do have to dig, but by law, it has to be there. So really recommend that you go and you dig for that. You can, most school districts, you can search by keywords on their website, and it'll pull up all kinds of goodies for you, and you'll find yourself going down lots of rabbit holes. But once you have the information, you will feel a whole different kind of empowered. And that is what you need, because they want us to be sort of ignorant to all of this stuff. They want us to be too busy to pay attention. And so we need to wake up, we need to pay attention. And the information is there. Please go dig for it. And as we've said many times tonight, if you need help with any of this, just reach out to any of us that are on the panel. And we will be happy to help you navigate to get that information. So we are getting down to our last like 15 minutes. I'm going to go through the hands up, and I'd like to close with Brad, because I want to give Brad a chance to talk about some of what's going on in the OSPI and how he would bring change to that position. So Seth, I'm going to turn to you, and then we'll hit Jeannie and Leslie, and I'm just going to let you guys go one after the other. So when Seth is done, Jeannie, you take it over.
Well, I'll try to keep it short, but there are really important things to say. First of all, I just want to reinforce what's being said about some of the things that are sneaking in under the guise of socio-emotional learning. It sounds so benign when it's put that way. Like, who wouldn't want your kids learning to be nice and learning good social skills? But as was pointed out, it's used as a way to slide in other things. I really loved the characterization of it as that's the operating system, and then all the other things with queer theory and climate justice and all these other things are just programs or apps within it, and they can just plug it into the operating system everywhere. And you cannot rely on just opting your kids out of socio-emotional learning lessons. You know, yes, there are in many schools, there are specific classes around socio-emotional learning, but I was a teacher. We were specifically trained to try to build socio-emotional learning into our lessons day to day. And it wasn't like, oh, we need a specific lesson plan for it. The way we were trained to do it was find learning opportunities. When there is a moment, turn it into a learning opportunity. So it's not going to be in the curriculum. It's not going to be pre-planned so you can find out about it ahead of time. What you have to do is organize against it on a broader scale. And a lot of that has to do with the curriculum that is being used. And so things like second step was mentioned. You want to find out what's in that curriculum, and they will. The school districts will fight tooth and nail to keep you from seeing it. You will probably come across second step. It's very widely used, and a common objection to parents filing public records requests about that is second step is a commercial curriculum company. So they will say, well, we can't show you the curriculum because you don't have a license to view it, and it's their private stuff. But here's the thing, if you file a public records request for something that the school district does not own, it's licensed for something, they are still required to give you the information that you want. So they need to like write a summary themselves if they can't share the curriculum. They are still legally mandated to show you what's there. And then next, I've got 2 more points and then I'll be done. This goes beyond even just socio-emotional learning. Something that was mentioned was community schools. This is something that actually comes from the United Nations. Community schools is something that was pioneered at an international level, and they are trying to replace the parents. And this is a really scary thing because American public schools are deeply vulnerable to this impulse of community schools replacing parents in the lives of their kids. If you do not know who John Dewey is, you need to look him up. I am going to copy and paste a link to his Wikipedia article. John Dewey was a professor at Columbia University. He was a philosopher, and he is the American public schools are what they are because of John Dewey. He designed the American public school system as it stands today. He is the single architect of how we do public schooling in this country. And he publicly and openly said that his goal was that school would replace the family as the social locus of a child's life, that their primary way of relating to other human beings would happen at school, where their values were derived from would come from school rather than their families. So this has been baked into the really nasty cake for a long time. And now there is a large, organized, and well-funded effort to bring that into the next level and make it into an organized part of the school, not just sort of baked into the philosophy. So we need to really fight back against this, and you need to use those advocacy tools that you have and those legal tools that you have to find out, is your school system getting involved in this? Are they getting on this really awful bandwagon that's heading for the edge of the cliff? And I'm just going to close with, if this sounds like a lot of work, yes, it is. But these are your children. No one else is going to be your child's parent. No matter what John Dewey said, or Randy Weingarten, the president of the NEA, or Becky Pringle, the president of the NEA. Randy is the AFT and the two teachers unions. No matter what they say about about there are kids too. No, I'm a teacher. They're not my kids. They're your kids. And you're the only one who's going to be able to advocate for them. You're the only one who is going to be able to be their parent and assert your rights to keep them as your children, not the state's children. So do the work.
Okay. I just wanted to say, piggyback off of what Alex said about having those conversations with your kids. My daughter is now in a private Christian school. I still have to have those conversations with my daughter. One of the reasons is, 40,000 students have been taken out of the public schools in the last 3 years. And where are they going? They're either being homeschooled or they're going to private schools now. So those kids who have been influenced by public schools for all those years are now in private and even private Christian schools. They are influencing kids there. So you still have to have those conversations with your children. My daughter is friends with a girl who identifies as non-binary. I have to have those conversations with her about what non-binary is and how it doesn't actually exist. This is a girl, and I have to say the blatant truth to her, even though it's uncomfortable for her, because she's like, well, that's my friend. How can I relate to her that way if that's going to hurt her feelings? I still have to talk to her about those things. So just, whether you're homeschooling or your kid is in a private school, you're doing co-ops, this is the age now where we have to have those conversations with our kids, no matter what, and no matter what age. Right now, my daughter's a teenager. If she were 5 years old, I would still be having these conversations with her because they're introducing it at every age now. And I just really want to encourage parents, don't assume that things are okay. You still have to talk to them. I remember working in a college and hearing, the term courageous conversations and, talking about uncomfortable racial issues or whatever. No, you need to have those courageous conversations with your children now.
And yeah, I was going to say pretty much the same thing. Even if your child has a good teacher, good teachers don't teach your morals and your values that you have at home. If you want your children taught with your morals and your values, you must teach them. That's the bottom line. When my kids were in the public school, the Chromebooks were not allowed to be brought home, so we couldn't look at them. The only way that I found out about the porn being happening at school was by the laptop that they would sell my son, and he would bring it home. And then I found out about it all. The lessons were being taught on YouTube. The teacher wasn't even in front of the class teaching. They would say, go to this YouTube channel, watch this video. That's how you're going to learn. The teachers weren't even teaching, at least at the school that my kids were going to. And when my kid would go to them and say, I don't understand, can you help me? And they'd say, no, you have to watch the YouTube video. So you have to assume that your kids will not be taught when they go to a public school.
I think that is really you said it so perfectly and so strongly, which I appreciate, because I think we as parents have really relinquished so much of our authority over the last few decades to the schools, and have let these teachers get away with this and really being the primary stakeholder, and they've taken on that role. That's what they wanted, and we allowed that to happen. And so it's not too late, and you be the parent, you are the primary stakeholder, and it is your duty and responsibility to teach your child your morals and values. It is my firm belief that that is how we save this country. And so to wrap us up, I'm going to, Brad, you take as much time as you need, because I do want to give you the floor to talk about what you plan to do as the next OSPI in Washington State, and how you can improve the system for our kids.
Well, let's get it done in seconds because we're 1 minute over time already. Anyway, I love each and every one of you. Thanks all of you for joining tonight. Thank you for the panelists. So many people had so many great things to say. Julie just repeated again, and it's the number one thing. Remember, these are your children. God has blessed you with these children. He did not bless the state of Washington with these children. He blessed you with these children, and they are your children. And I, as running for OSPI Superintendent of Public Instruction, want to establish one more time a government that is for the people, by the people. And so I want to establish a coalition of parents who work with their local school boards with the Superintendent of Public Instruction for the academic instruction of our children. And one more time, make this the greatest education system in the world in Washington State. We can do it. We have not lost this battle. We're in this battle. We're in the fight. And if not in it yet, get in it. Get on your local talk show. I've heard leave on several stations that I've been on. 6:10 a.m. is from 3 to 5 every day, Monday through Friday. It's from 509-547-1610. 509-547-1610. You can join the conversation, be a part of that. Get on Lars Larson. I've been on Lars Larson. Leave has, and so is Jim Walsh, lots of others. Get out there and win the battle of public opinion. The Jason Rantz Show is another place to get yourself on. Julie's been on there. I've been on there. Get out there, get in this battle, win this battle. Don't stop, never give up. I remember one time I was going to say to Jason Rantz, and I stopped myself, I think, if I didn't, I should have, that if they expect us to give up our children, they're not going to take our children without a fight. And I thought, what a stupid thing to say. They're not going to take our children. We're going to fight. We'll never give up. We'll never stop. We will always, for the rest of our lives, the last breath is in our lungs, we will fight for our children. They're our children. And that's it. Love you guys. We got to go.
That's awesome. Wonderful. Well, thank you to all of our attendees who joined us tonight. This will be available for replay in a couple days. I want to thank all of our panelists. You guys were just amazing tonight, and you gave so much great information, so many great resources, really encouraging and empowering. I hope that the audience felt that way as well. And again, please don't hesitate to reach out to any of these folks. If you didn't catch their email or didn't catch a link, you can also go to our website, conservativeladiesofwa.com, and you can contact us there and we'll hook you up. I would also encourage you to join us, become a member of Conservative Ladies of Washington, get in the fight. We will help you get active. You can join our team. We do weekly meetings. You can find that also at conservativeladiesofwa.com. Our members make these events happen. So thanks also to our CLW members. And that'll wrap us up for tonight. Next week, we will be back with your 2A rights in Washington. We will have our friend William Kirk, the president of Washington Gun Law, along with Senator Linda Wilson and Representative Jim Walsh, to talk about what's going on with your gun rights and the status of some of those. So join us again next week at 7 o'clock on Tuesday, the 25th. Have a good night, everybody. And thanks again to all our panelists.